Upon my return to Munich, I found that conditions had changed frightfully. Mother, father, and Karl looked very sickly and undernourished. No one had heard from George, who had gone to the front. My father's business was at a new low, and he was forced to sell one after another of his vans, of which at one time he had had about 20. The draft horses had been either used for food or had been confiscated. Political corruption hit a new high, and people were openly talking about revolution. Many people were advocating a union with France, retaining Prince Rupert and crowning him as King of Bavaria under the grace of France. Being a boy of only 15, I thought anything would be acceptable in preference of war and endless misery. I longed to see my father with healthy cheeks again, behind his anvil. I would have liked to have seen again the smile of my mother. During the summer months of 1918, I made very strenuous bicycle trips out to the country to hoard a little food for the family. Stern measures against the little fellow's hoarding were then enacted, and even the highways leading into the countryside were patrolled for incoming bicyclists who had managed to get a few pounds of nourishment. In those days, I came out at night without lights, like a thief. Truly, the physical and mental tortures of a hoarding trip were exhausting upon the nervous system. One night, about 30 miles from Munich, I had a few pounds of horse-link sausage, a pound or two of veal, and half-dozen eggs in the basket of my bicycle. I had succeeded in buying these things from a friendly farmer. He warned me that a certain section of the highway would be rigidly patrolled near his place, and that the only way to detour the authorities would be to cut diagonally through a large swamp. But even the detour had to be made at night, because the section there was quite flat, and in daylight the police might have discovered me crossing the swamp. Although the farmer gave me all directions carefully, I lost my way completely that night and had a horrible experience, in that I nearly drowned in the soft bog earth. I spent a fearful night and trembled to safety in the early daylight. I arrived home more dead than alive. During those days, the Social Democratic Party invoked strikes in the munitions factories, and went so far as to stop trains that brought food and munitions to the front. At least that's what I heard then. A couple of fellow colleagues took me to a meeting of that party one night in October 1918. The participants demanded a break with Prussia, a general strike, arrest of the king, and erection of a democratic republic based on America's Constitution. Some speakers denounced capitalism, the Kaiser, and praised President Woodrow Wilson, the prophet of peace. Another speaker advocated a German union of republics, including Prussia. Part of the people hailed him, part denounced him. Still another speaker declared for union with France, excluding Prussia. But it was apparent that the meeting consisted of mostly red elements. They were opposed to religion. Therefore, general disorder followed, and finally the meeting was broken up by the police. I remember my keen interest and sympathy for President Wilson, the savior of humanity. He became an adored figure among the masses. Wilson had a plan for eternal world peace, and outlined his plan and peace conditions in a simple 14 points. France and England were apparently for it. All we had to do was show our goodwill and a general housekeeping. this housekeeping was soon to begin. Enormous masses of people marched uncontrolled and disorderly down Ludwigstrasse in Munich. They marched down Karlstrasse. They marched down Residenzstrasse. Their goal was the king's residence. They shouted and roared, and I followed the endless litany of monotonous outcries. Down with the king! Down with the Kaiser! Long live Wilson! Down with capitalism! Long live democracy! Hundreds of people decorated themselves with the American flag, and I very distinctly remember placing one in my buttonhole. Nor did I realize then the all-embracing importance that flag would play in the course of my life. Armistice was declared, and everybody was glad and full of joy, though his stomach was empty. A crime wave unheard of in the history of the country followed. I believe sometime in May 1919, or a little earlier, the Communists marched into Munich and took possession of all municipal, state, and federal offices. Churches were closed. A reign of terror began. Warehouses were plundered. The contents distributed to the Red soldiers. All newspapers were confiscated and published under the new regime. Thousands of elderly people and babies perished for want of food. Inflation started. People began to lose faith in money. Everybody tried to buy anything with his last few pennies. A number of highly esteemed Munich citizens were executed at the Luitpold Gymnasium. Anyone who dared to say a syllable against the regime was arrested and usually never heard from again. Individual atrocities occurred by the thousands. Food became very rare unless one belonged to the Red Army. This helped to swell the rank and file of the Red Army. A large army was drilled and forced to march against Berlin to free our brothers. People were in a frightful panic. It was during those frightful weeks when I tried to return home with my bicycle from my business place that I was stopped at Sendlinger Torplatz by a troop of Red soldiers who blocked all streets from there and questioned everybody. A man in civil cloth and red armband took my bicycle and asked me if I better not join the Red forces. I retorted that I was expected home, that I never had any military training, and that I was scared to death. The man laughed and then asked me point blank, "Yes or no? Are you for or against the Red World Revolution?" In my great fear for reprisals, I assured him that my heart was for the Red movement. "That is all that's necessary. You are going with us. As for your fears, we will teach you how to be brave." I pleaded with the man to let me notify my parents about my situation, without success. I was given a red armband and attached to a machine gun squad. Many other young people were thus forced to join the Red Army. During the course of the next 8 days, I experienced the worst mental agony I ever went through in all my life. Munich became the scene of battle. Large red contingencies were said to be fighting gloriously before the very doors of Munich. We went to a huge meeting at the municipal slaughterhouse in Munich, and big speeches were made to inspire the militia present. "We shall fight to the finish. We shall win. Long live the world revolution. Long live Trotsky." We left the meeting that night with 3 more machine gun squads to occupy and hold a railway bridge and viaduct at the cross-section of Lindwurmstrasse and Implerstrasse. This happened to be very close to my home, For some inexplicable reason, instead of 4 squads, we were the only ones to arrive. The rest disappeared into the night. Our leader called them traitors, but I detected fear in his voice when he said it. Dawn came, and we hadn't heard a shot yet. In the meanwhile, a report came in by telephone through a railway signal station at the bridge that the Reichswehr was closing in and was entering the city from all sides. In one section of the city, the Red machine gun squads had made a successful and heroic stand by placing bourgeois children between them and the machine guns, in order that the white hounds could not answer their fire. Our leader thought it was a grand idea, but it was too late to transform any of his thoughts into action, for almost silently we could see from the bridge far up Lindwurmstrasse 2 lines approaching us, snugged against the houses along the street. The Reichswehr is coming! And now the shooting began, not from our squad, but from the housetops where the Red machine gunners were nested. We had to hold the bridge, and we were rather well protected. Terrible fears possessed me. Slowly, the Reichswehr moved up, watching the housetops and shooting at anything that moved. Nearly all of the apartment houses in that section are immediately adjacent to one another. The Reichswehr stormed into the houses and drove the Red nests to flight. They ran on the rooftops of the buildings in an attempt to reach the adjacent ones, but they were shot down, one by one. I saw them fall to their deaths, smashing their heads and bones against hard pavement below. This was an insanely frightful experience, and it obviously got our leader. We had not fired a single shot yet when our squad leader decided to retire into a warehouse across the railroad tracks called Lindwurmhof. There we would make our stand. I was supposed to carry a large munitions box with another fellow who was as white in the face as I was. Just as we made our way across the railway tracks to enter the warehouse, the main gang having already entered, my companion carrier dropped the box, which fell right on my toes, and he began to run like a madman. In spite of my toe injuries, I too began to run as fast as I ever did in my life, hiding and running among the brush that grew by the railway tracks. I reached the viaduct, about a half-mile away. I chased wildly, drunken with fear, up an incline, which led me to Lekavsky-Strasse, and ran right into the yard of the Steinheil Optical Experimental Observatory, where I collapsed. When I woke up, I found myself lying on a table with my feet heavily bandaged. A Reichswehr doctor was attending my wounds and condition. As I learned later, the building had already been occupied by the Reichswehr. The caretaker of Steinheil had seen me run into the yard and collapse. This caretaker revealed to me that the first thing he had done was remove my red armband because he felt that such a young boy could not possibly be a soldier. He was afraid that had the Reichswehr seen my armband, they might shoot me. That day of all days, they did not spare any lives. Maybe the good man saved my life. I was delivered to my home, where my mother had been worried to the point of hysteria. I am almost positive that those trying days were responsible for the early death of my mother. Thus the communistic uprising had collapsed. Many nationalistic groups had combined with the Reichswehr and took things over for a while. But the Reichswehr could not stay long. There was disorder everywhere. The Reichswehr was then only a police force, limited by France and England to only 100,000 men, a number inadequate to cope with the conditions. When the Reichswehr left, a citizens' army was formed. The Einwohnerwehr was headed by Dr. von Kahr, who became Premier of Bavaria. Without my parents' consent, I secretly joined the Einwohnerwehr, for under no circumstances would I have another red regime. The Einwohnerwehr was a paramilitary police force sanctioned by the Prussian Ministry of the Interior. It gave citizens the power to protect themselves from looters, armed gunmen, and revolutionaries. People of all walks of life joined. Some were wholly inexperienced, like myself, and others were ex-soldiers. I could not participate in any military training because I could not hold a rifle straight and was finally rejected as too young. We had at that time all over the German lands about 75 different political parties, every one of which tried to convince the people that they are the ones who are able to improve conditions. But such magic did not occur. Corruption and crooked lobbying were on the daily order. Unemployment rose to new heights. The gold in the vaults of the Reichsbank dwindled into nothingness. Then, in late 1919, or early 1920, a railway employee by the name of Drexler and a handful of other men formed a new political party, the National Socialistic German Workers' Party. One of their members was an ex-soldier by the name of Adolf Hitler. On some occasions this man seemed to show quite an ability to speak convincingly, and was therefore urged to speak in larger meetings to get more members. Hitler consented, and from then on took a leading role in the party, finally becoming leader of the entire party. Not until 1921 did I hear Hitler speak. My job in the piano house kept me out of politics, to my great despair. However, sometime in 1921, I joined the Nazi Party as a paying member. I believe my membership number was 3750. Whenever I could possibly free myself, I would help to distribute pamphlets that announced a Hitler speech. He usually spoke to the huge Circus Krone building, which held around 5,000 people. The circus was always filled to capacity, and many people were turned away. I attended probably 10 or 12 such evenings. I held the position of a Saalschutz, and I received an armband. My armband showed a swastika with a golden bronze metal 5 stamped on it. I never had any military training with the Nazis, because I could not attend their meetings steadily, but I would have if I could have had the chance. Hitler had a way of foretelling political events. He stressed that we were all Germans and must work together. Hitler always stressed the necessity of work and urged a standard, instead of gold, based upon the working capacity of the nation. He spoke at his meetings that corruption must be dealt with before Germany could ever bolster herself up. He stressed over and over that he simply wanted Germany to be left alone and to let her work out her own destiny. He would never interfere with any political order in any other country. He also urged general disarmament throughout the European nations. God would only help those who were willing to help themselves. Hitler spoke to us that Germans must unite to work our way out of our economic struggles. He said interest on money should be abolished. He said inflation would rob us of our last pennies, and all of our life savings, and that our houses would be taken away and all of our property confiscated if we did not act quickly. Hitler's sphere of influence was restricted only to Munich then. I had lost all hopes for the future of Germany. I firmly believed in the downfall of the Reich into fragments of states, some with France, some with Poland, and whatnot. Inflation was at its height. Everybody had lost his savings, and my own father, once a wealthy man, was now poor as a church mouse. Business houses went bankrupt. Everybody who worked was paid daily because the next day would bring higher prices. When finally the mark was re-established as gold mark, 1 American dollar cost 4.2 billion marks at the exchange. Somebody made the profits, but it is not for me to say who made it. I just don't know. I only know that everybody lost everything.